Conversations with Life. I'm Xochi, and I'm here with Cedar and Keith, and today we're going to talk about physical health and how that corresponds to the meaning path.
Yeah, and I think, there's, I see like a category and a subcategory here. Like the category is body, the physical body. It's, such an interesting thing. We could talk about forever about that. And then the health aspect of a journey is really interesting because I think that a lot of times when people start working with the body, they get out of a conscious work with it. Like it becomes ego, really. Mm-hmm. Something in our body and our ego are tied up.
Yeah.
Real close, like we think about ourselves as this thing. We're not this thing, mm-hmm. but this is what we got. This is kind of how we are. So it's funny. In some religious things, the body's worthless.
Yeah, it's the bad thing that you try to transcend.
Yeah, and in some, it's like this is the thing. Yeah,
mm-hmm. And in our just contemporary culture, it's one of the biggest ways that media manages us, teaches us to compete with each other, creates impossible standards around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's a lot going on there.
It's such an interesting thing because this is one of those things, like I was driven to a fitness journey out of necessity, right? Mm-hmm. And I had tried out of vanity many times to like lose the weight and get fit. And, I want to look good and I want this and I want that. I want to be able to wear these size clothes. And it just never worked. It never was successful. I tried so many fad diets. When I was 19, my mom paid for me to have like a laparoscopic band surgery. Like,
oh, wow.
Like literally, I still can't stand the taste of cooked celery because of the celery soup diet I did when I was like 13. Like really, like kind of a brutal upbringing around weight and fitness. And like I talked about it the other day, and I was thinking like, how come it's working now? People are like, well, what did you do? What worked? And I'm like, I just answer with the like typical like, I track my macros and go to the gym. Like I'm just like whatever. Like I hadn't done that like 1,000 times before, because telling them that like I worked doesn't make sense. Like
the diet didn't work. You worked.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And it's like like they don't understand. Like it couldn't be about the vanity and the physical and everyone else for me. It was mm-hmm. like my doctor sat me down and was like, we're going to put you on insulin like in a month unless you can get the weight down. Right. And it was like, your feet are going to start going numb pretty soon. Like you're starting to lose sensation in some of your feet, like it was a huge, like you're going to die and your kids are going to still be in school. Like, can you figure your shit out? Kind of a wake up call, right? That got me into it. And then now I still don't go for anybody else. Like the diabetes is gone, the blood pressure is gone. And I go to the gym and I see these guys and girls that are there in like, you can tell the second they walk in the gym, right? They look great. They're doing a fantastic job. And any fitness is difficult fitness. But if you're at the gym in like a baseball cap and like, tight yoga pants or like the like people wearing like really nice like Jordans, like sneakers. And I'm like, hold on. Like how concerned are you right now with the exercise if you're this concerned about it? Like I go in like the rattiest looking shit I own. You know what I mean? Like I am pretty sure like my gym attire is just old shirts that Paradigm gave me when I was a teacher there that was like, and their hoodies. Like I go and I rep a school I don't even work at anymore. But you can tell, and you can like, and there are people who wear the yoga pants and all the things, and they're really, really trying. And there are people who are there, and I'm like, you're here to be seen as being here. And for some people, it's like a social thing. And I'm like, cool, that's great. Mm-hmm. But like, you got to think about this. Like, are you going to keep this up when you're like 40 or 50 or 60 or are you going to care what they think? And if not, are you going to like totally F yourself up by like going all this hard now, and then your body's going to go into withdrawal? Anyway, it's just such an interesting thing, like what motivates people and what works long term.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, and the media would have us believe that like you have to be fit to be good. You know, you have to be healthy and have a six pack, or at least have like some rippling biceps and lift this much weight and have a butt you can bounce a quarter off or whatever.
Yeah.
To be morally good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like
And even there's like a status thing, like
to be of value. Exactly.
You are a lower category of human if
Yeah.
you don't go to the gym every day, you know? And that's an interesting field of distortion to be swimming in when you're just trying to figure out this highly unique machine that your consciousness is residing in.
Right. And I'm like, if it's not affecting you, this is my thing. If it's not affecting your health, like my situation, like, yes, I go to the gym like 6-7 days a week. I'm doing an hour to an hour and a half of a workout every day. But like my alternative was an early grave, right? I'm 36 and I was looking at already being well beyond middle age. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
But if it's not doing that to you, like the amount of people that I saw that were as heavy as me and just had no real health issues, like they're just doing fine. I'm like, yeah, what incentive do you have? If you're fine, you're not like your health isn't crippled or whatever. Like I know weight causes like a reduction in years technically and increased pressure on your heart. There's like fitness stuff. But if you're not at a point where you're trying to be fit enough to be able to enjoy life, there comes it's like a balancing point. There comes a point where you're going to the gym so much and worrying about your diet so much that you sacrifice enjoyment of life.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the other way where you just like glutton on stuff and eat shit and don't ever work out, where you're also sacrificing enjoyment of life. Like at a certain point, your knees don't work anymore, right? So it's like finding that balance to me should be the point.
Mm.
How am I fit and healthy enough to enjoy life for as long as I possibly can in whatever phase I'm in? And if for you, that's 310 pounds, cool, like go have fun.
Yeah.
Good job, right? Like, and if it's someone else, it's not, like, that's okay.
Mm.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the ego can play on either side of this. It can play at the gym. It can play by not going to the gym.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it can be like, well, I'm going to be, you know, those health fanatics. I'm not going to be one of those. Or it can be like, look at me. What are all these other people doing? Do you even lift, bro? I mean, it really can play.
I hate lifting,
the
man.
ego can play on either side of those. I think what most of us miss most of the time is the body's just another experience of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And the question for me really is, can you be with it? You know, like, can you be with this? Whatever your experiences you're having, can you be with it? And I think that is such an individual answer, you know?
Right.
I can say that probably, just like anything, probably some care and some practice, like exercise, is needed. But it's one of these funny things. The body's funny because we all start at such a different place. Like the mix of chemicals that made you is such a crapshoot. You know, it's such a lottery. And I've been lucky to enjoy robust health that I didn't have to try for. You know, it's just in my genes. We're long. The Barfuses and the Lissies are long lived. And fairly healthy. You know, my grandmother lived into her 90s. You know, and my mother passed away in her early 80s because, you know, stress. But you know, it's just been the case all the way. It's been just a pretty big health history. But anyway, so you've been on a health journey. I've
been on a health journey.
There's been a thing, and you've been on a health journey for a long time. I was curious, you know, as part of this, and thinking about all the ins and outs of it. You know, finding the balance, finding the place. You know, just kind of, you know, maybe describe to us a little bit about what you did, and kind of some of the issues around it, because I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, it's been quite a thing, and a pretty deep mental health and spiritual health connection there too. I don't remember a time in my life where I wasn't in pain, even as a child.
Yeah.
So it's just something that I've dealt with, and I don't think about it a lot. Probably have some autoimmune stuff. I've never been diagnosed, but so there's that, and then the metabolic stuff. You know, when I went through puberty over like a 3 to 4 week period, I went up from like a size 5 to a size 12. Like my body changed so much so quickly that like all of my athletic skill and ability, you know, I was running cross country and doing all this stuff, and all of a sudden I was like, I can't do this stuff anymore. I just don't even have the energy.
Yeah.
And I just didn't have a lot of support. It was kind of like, you know, figure it out, and tried, you know, like Keith was saying, so many things throughout my life to get on top of it. And a lot of times just didn't even find myself resourced enough to do the exercise or to do, you know, to get enough bandwidth to like focus on the nutrition or whatever. But oh man, did I try all the things. And each time I got pregnant, I held on to a little more weight and kind of did that and just basically forgot about my body. It was like, I have other things that are more important in my life. Obviously, this isn't going to get good. So I'm going to focus on things that I can, you know, control and help and whatever, and really focused on just taking care of my kids and my husband and, you know, church stuff, and many days never even looked in the mirror. You know, I would just exist, you know. And then when I started midwifery, I caught something, and I know we've talked about this a little bit before, where I caught something of my self essence, and it lit me up. And the only thing that I changed was I was like, well, I'm not going to eat refined sugar because I think I'm going to need all the help I can get if I want to be a midwife. That was the only thing I did. And within, I think, 2 months, I had lost 40 pounds, just dropped it.
Wow.
I just became a completely different physical person because I was doing something for myself. You know, I was living this part of myself, and I was so motivated by the joy I was feeling in, you know, launching into this career. But again, I wasn't like doing any kind of workout, anything special other than I'm not going to eat refined sugar. And that, you know, kind of led me into getting a little more fit, moving a little more, noticing other things. And then I got to a point where I looked and felt probably better than I ever had in my life. And I started noticing the judgment. I started noticing me looking down on other people. And I was just like, no, I'm not. This is not why I'm doing this. Like something's got to shift. And then I spiraled into a huge health crisis with COVID and long COVID. And since then have been just, in some ways, barely hanging on. Like, it's pretty hard for me to get through day to day in any kind of normal functioning. And my kids are still young. You know, I had a lot of kids, so I still have a 9-year-old. And I'm like, I got to be okay for these kids. I got another 10 years of parenting, you know?
Yeah.
So that kind of like led me to this wellness retreat I went to last week in Hawaii.
Quick pause for just a second. I just want to point out a couple patterns before we go into this next chapter.
Yeah.
Because I really loved your story. Like, from the time you were little, your mom's putting you on whack diets, right? Yeah. And it's so, to me, that's so interesting. You know, I had a health mother too, but kind of in a different direction. Just, you know, she was like going to save the world with Chinese nutrition. It was odd. It was crazy. It's like this whole thing. I grew up kind of in a health cult, you know. Yeah. But it's interesting. And then your situation where like something in your body is just somewhat broken, you know. Yeah. So like there, and people look at you and say, what?
They automatically assume that I'm not doing something.
Yeah,
you know?
Or that you're doing the wrong thing.
Yeah, and it's so funny because I have this husband that, like, he's been doing CrossFit for the last 5 years, but previous to that, exact same diet, exact same lifestyle, other than he went to work all day at work and I worked all day with our little kids, and completely different results.
Yeah, thin.
That guy couldn't gain a pound for anything. He's like stayed at the same weight for all 28 years of our marriage.
Yeah, but now he's all buffed out and looks pretty.
Yeah, he's like built, but he's still not. I think he maybe is like 2 pounds more than he was.
Oh, interesting.
That's crazy.
So it's so interesting. Like these different perspectives, these different kind of like places to come from, and I think that's. The body is a really good symbol of the whole human experience. We all come from a place, but it's so physical. It's a stupid thing to say, but it's so, you know what I mean? Tangible, like observable.
Yeah, measurable.
I can't measure somebody's enlightenment, or even, any kind of measure of intelligence really is really hard to get. But like a body, like how it is, we can kind of measure where we come from and where we're going, etc. So it's interesting. So in some ways, it's like it's just as unknowable, but in some ways, it's so much observable. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's so weird.
Such an interesting
because on top of what I had to deal with in myself and the discomfort of being in the body that I'm in, I'm wading through a field of rejection that just gets stronger every year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the amount of resistance that I have to doing anything for my health increases every year because now anything I do for my health isn't just for my health. It's also proving a bunch of assholes right. Because they're all like, oh, if she would just.
Yeah, if you would just do these things.
If you would just do these things.
You'd be healthy.
And then that time when I changed so much, there were people who didn't recognize me in my church and stuff. They were like, oh my gosh, what happened? And it's just oh, I love myself. That's what happened. That's all. I tried all the other things.
Yeah, I noticed the emotional and even the body resistance, the stuff that gets in our way a little bit. So if I'm going to improve myself in any way, one of the things that I know I'm stubborn as hell. I have to do it my way, which is kind of a good thing and a bad thing, right? It's really interesting. In Keith's case, he kind of got almost an ultimatum, right?
Do this or you're fucked.
Do this or you're fucked, right? Which is kind of an interesting place as well, to be mindful in a situation where you feel that much threat is that's really interesting. And to be mindful in a place where I know Xochi's dealt with a lot of judgment, a lot of people looking at her and saying, what's the matter with you, right? So it's threat and judgment and these big energies in this experience.
Oh yeah,
it's so fascinating,
And the thing about weight and health and stuff too is it's really, really easy to get micro with your measurements, right? In my bathroom, I can go onto a set of scales that will tell me the percentage of water I have in my system. You know what I mean? It's really granular, and yet it doesn't mean shit.
Yeah.
I can tell you all my numbers, and you can be like, oh. Especially 2 years ago, you'd be like, holy shit, you're morbidly obese. But to look at me, I'm tall, I have broad shoulders, I have a big rib cage. People were always surprised when I was I'm 320 pounds. They'd be like, really? I'm like, yeah, now I'm 230 right now. And I don't look 230 because of my frame. But and I had it in a very different way too. I had so much judgment and bullying and ridicule, and I kind of took control and used humor, right? And so, yeah, for a while, I did not get any kind of attention from women until I realized I could make them laugh their pants, off. And that was my way of doing things, right? But I remember when I started to get fit, the judgment I received then of being why didn't you do this before?
Yeah.
And didn't our kids matter to you, 5 years ago? Why didn't you do it then? And even things you could see the threat to my ex-wife. When I started getting fit, she started getting nervous.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of that was realization from her that you know, with a personality built of fat and a body built of less of that, you're actually pretty okay. You don't like the dependence that you come to experience in an abusive relationship. Getting my body right and getting my mind right was such a confidence boost and freedom boost. I could see her getting more and more upset as I got more and more healthy.
Yeah, revealing that power dynamic of like her needing you to be sick, basically, for her to feel good.
And it was so funny because like at that time, like divorce wasn't even on the horizon. But I was begging her to come work out with me and to come and exercise with me and come have fun with me and go on hikes and stuff. And she's like, no, I don't want to do that. And I'm like, and then seeing the resentment, I'm like, why are you getting mad? Like I'm getting fit. And I remember one of the things she said to me when we finally ended the relationship was she's like, you're just doing this because you're hot now. And I was like, bitch, you've been married to me for a decade. Do you think I was ugly the whole fucking time? Like, Jesus.
Because you're hot now. You know, it's interesting because my spouse went through a similar transformation where she carried weight her whole life, you know, been a little chubby and just, you know, had 6 kids, you know, had the body of having 6 kids, and then got into this yoga thing. We did CrossFit for a while together, and that, I mean, when she had baby number 7, which was a surrogacy, actually it was baby number 8 because she had a miscarriage. So she had baby number 8, which was a miscarriage, which is the surrogacy.
Right.
Her body she was as heavy as I am. Right, which like
she's got a very small frame. Like she's tall but thin.
Yeah, right. She does, but you wouldn't have known it. Like you would have said she was big boned if you saw her, you know, 5 years ago. Yeah, because after that she was you know, large. And I honestly, you know, as a person, don't really have a preference for large or small or whatever. I don't see that the way that other people do for some reason. I don't know why. I just don't. And you know, like. But, you know, I thought she was beautiful, but she was heavier, you know, she's definitely bigger. And then she went on this yoga thing. And it's weird because what I say is like yoga did her, you know, and it shifted our dynamic. But it mostly shifted it from her perspective to me is my perception. I don't know. Like, that's kind of what it felt like to me is like, it shifted the way that she felt in relationship to me. Cause I've just been pretty much me, kind of the same body. I kind of just maintain this kind of same level, you know, a little more fit, a little less fit, but I just kind of,
I mean, it looks like to me, I mean, I bet you like what, 6 years ago? It looks like nothing has changed.
Yeah, right. I did CrossFit for a while,
like,
and
have you aged? Like, I don't even understand. Like,
arms, whatever. But I keep a pretty like good muscle. I don't do anything, and I keep pretty good muscle mass. It's just kind of how I am, you know. Maybe it'll change as I'm getting older here, but yeah, that was really just interesting to feel the relationship, how that shifts, you know, and how our context keeps us in a place, and then the physical. Well, we start at different places. We are at different places. We all have different factors. But the physical does still give us feedback. You know, like there's always feedback coming in it. You just can't judge it. You know, just like you can't judge anything.
It can't have a bearing on value. That's the thing of it.
But it inevitably it does so much, especially the physical body. You know, how much money somebody makes. You know, their skill set, how they hold themselves, communicate, whatever, how they're in a relationship, whatever. All that has a feedback, you know, and draws judgment, whatever, but nothing draws judgment like the physical form.
Crazy.
Well, and also everything you're talking about there, like money and stress and charisma and all those things are how do I want to say this? They are affected by and affect the physical form. You know, like when you're overweight, confidence is really hard to build, right? And then when you're pretty and fit and handsome, it's really like it's not conducive to building like personality sometimes.
Well, yeah,
like you know what I mean. Like you don't have a need to be funny.
Yeah,
if you're good looking.
That's right.
Like fortunately, Steve, you're good looking and funny. But like,
why? Thank you.
Not everyone gets that package.
But there's this funny. Well, you know, I managed to be a loser in a whole other set of parameters.
That's what it is. You have to be a loser to be funny, guys. You heard it here first.
I often cite the study that he did that you know, good-looking women were generally less intelligent or perceived as less intelligent. You know, or the higher the beauty perception goes, the lower generally the intelligence perception goes.
And I will say, gym bros fall into that same category. It's not just women.
You know, perhaps there's that same line. But what, you know, the thing is that these women that are good looking aren't less intelligent, in fact. But what happens is nobody will disagree with them.
Yeah, so discourse goes down.
They put them in a room with people, right? And so like, you know, a good looking woman says something, and none of the guys in the room say no. But if she's less attractive, they'll disagree with her, which is hilarious, which doesn't reflect well on masculinity or
it does not. It does not reflect well on what we as men value.
So anyway, with that context, I want to hear about the you know, I think it's good to talk about this health retreat because there was some profound stuff that happened there and that you shifted.
Big stuff. Yeah, and I think, you know, one more little point just around all of that about my experience, and I'm guessing that Keith has experienced this as well, is that people would rather be friends with an asshole that's good looking than with me.
Oh yeah.
Like I would have these like deep connections, just like total heart, soul, and person after person would walk off with somebody that was beautiful that treated them poorly.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's such a strange thing for me. And that's something that emotionally, like that's one of those things that cycles back around for me, even like to this time period, that I have to work another level of that kind of like rejection simply based on how I look. And that is what people are using to measure whether or not I'm, you know, friend or girlfriend material.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I met this chef in December. We went to a retreat and I was asked to help with the cooking, and the main guy that was cooking is this chef that grew up in a family. His dad was a chef, and now he's a chef / nutrition coach. And we actually got into a conflict right away and were able to move through it, which is always a sign that I can trust somebody.
Yeah.
You know, like, and so we ended up just chatting, and he taught me some, you know, kitchen skills. And then I found out he's doing this retreat, and it was a 8-day retreat in Hawaii, and 5.5 of those days we fasted. And
wow.
Yeah. So I signed up for this because I was like, I've tried everything. And as I feel myself like slipping into kind of some premenopause stuff, it's having like these little slight hormone changes are having huge impact on my day-to-day functioning, which already wasn't great since COVID.
Right.
So I'm like, I got to do something. And so if I can go to Hawaii for a week and have my metabolism, my digestive system, you know, reset, it's worth a try.
I mean, it's also Hawaii. Like,
right.
Like, fuck it.
Right.
Right.
And
like,
so, you know, if you're going to fast for 5.5 days, for sure do it in Hawaii.
Right.
And, you know, one of the most fascinating things is not eating was the easiest part. Like, it wasn't even a big deal.
I mean, like, what kind of access to food did you have? Like, if you were at a retreat where...
We were in a Hawaiian paradise that had fruit dropping on the ground around us.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yikes. Like a mango falls in your head. You're like, fuck you, man.
It was like a Stark room where you're like sitting there by yourself going, I'd like to eat something.
No, there was food everywhere.
I don't know which is worse, actually.
That's worse. I guess.
You can smell the food. You might.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's plenty of food around. And, you know, we did have some rules about talking about food, like being sensitive to where people were with that. And what ended up being for me is I actually thought it was fun and kind of funny because it was edgy. Because it would get your mind and your saliva going. And like we would talk about like how good something sounded that we'd never even thought of how good it was before, you know. So that was actually kind of fun
Peanut
for
butter
me.
and jam. It's like, oh God.
And yeah, and then just like being in a place where like there was no question of whether or not I was going to do the fast. So I could be really in observation of my thoughts instead of getting caught up in them or believing them or knowing that I was going to act on them. And it was fascinating to see like how so much of our hunger comes from emotional or other kinds of pain that we are trying to get some relief from, either an emotional or physical pain. And, the hardest thing for me was the physical pain, that with the different symptoms I have, particularly not having any collagen in my diet for that 5.5 days was excruciating. Like, by the last day, it was really hard for me to stand for more than a few minutes. I could walk. Like, we went on hikes and I could walk as long as I stayed moving. But as soon as I stood still, it just felt like my legs were getting torn off my torso. So a few different profound moments. One was we did a disrobing ceremony, and most of the other participants at the retreat were, largely single people who had a pretty top-notch fitness lifestyle. That nobody was there dealing with health challenges except for me.
Wow.
And everybody was within the range of what you would maybe say culturally appropriate body size. And so that was interesting. That was a hard field for me to go into.
I've observed that with you generally. Like, you're in the Tantra field, sexuality and, mindfulness and relationship and whatever. So it's just so interesting, like, in a way, it's given you extra magic in that place.
Yeah.
Because you have to show up really self-aware and conscious and holding in that way, just because of everybody else's perceptions, not necessarily because you're not comfortable with yourself,
Right. So to get up there in my mess.
Yeah.
And it ended up that I went last. We each had this sacred opportunity to slowly remove our clothing and introduce our bodies to the rest of the group. And it was deeply moving and sacred for every single person, and so I get up there and I'm up there in my mess and I'm just like, I fucking love this. I love every inch of this. I think it's hilarious sometimes how it looks, how it jiggles, whatever, but there's so much love here. I'm so grateful for what I've been able to do with this body. And that was meaningful and mind-blowing even for some of the other participants. And we got through to the day where we started introducing food, and I think that our chef guy was just so excited to share his gifts with us that he might have overfed us that day, because we ate something
5.5 days, I feel
amazing every 2 hours, and then ended with this huge dinner. So we started with bone broth, and then it was sauerkraut, and then yogurt, and then it was dinner.
Yeah.
And I woke up the next morning feeling like absolute shit.
Oof.
And I was just like, what have I done? I just took my body through this really extreme situation. And I went in 24 hours from the least I've ever eaten to the most I've ever eaten. This does not feel good.
Yeah.
Is there any hope? Is this going to be what was the whole point of that, And I just sat there with that and kind of went into some meditation. And it was just oh yeah, it's not about this. It's not about this. And it was just remember, you're not going to wait. You're done waiting to be love and to feel joy. And your body doesn't have to feel good for you to be love and feel joy. And that was kind of the transmission that I walked around with for the rest of the experience. And it was such an important reminder, I think, to me and just to the whole group field of why are we doing this? And are we using this to condition ourselves against love? Are we waiting to enjoy our lives until our body has some standard of look or feeling or whatever. And I was just like, no, I like took all my authority back from that, that concept, and then ended up having a few really, really fantastic days where I really felt the reset. I felt like, oh, I'm in a different body right now. Everything's different. Started my period a couple days after I got home and completely crashed. It completely reversed like whatever I'd been feeling. And again, it was just like, okay, where are you going to be with this? Are you going to be in your head? Are you going to be beating yourself up? Are you going to be like noticing every little thing you eat and scrutinizing and what did I do and and I can't believe I spent all that money and now I already just feel like shit again. Like there were so many choices of, thought roads that I could go down, and I was just like, no, like I'm not waiting. Like, all the love in the universe is available to me right now, and I accept what life brings. So, no question, that was the best retreat I've ever been to. It was the most profound experience, and I did it for the experience, not for the outcome. So, can I hold that every day? Whatever life brings me, whatever happens with this body, can I remember that I'm about love? And that's really where the commitment landed for me. Much more so than any kind of, I'm still following the diet protocol and stuff like that. Like I'm with it, but
it's not about it anymore.
Yeah, and if it comes between me and love, for me, if I am in a decision of, am I going to make a big deal out of eating or not eating something, and that's going to sacrifice my centeredness on love, then I'll choose love.
Well, I have to even stop myself from saying the next thing.
Okay, let's watch you stop.
Great. That's great audio, that is. Just watch Steve stop himself on a fucking podcast.
But I'm going to say it anyway.
Fail. Immediate fail.
Immediate fail. But not a fail because it needs to be said, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
I mean, the obvious thing is, from that place, those choices are more harmonious.
Yeah.
And the reason why we go into dishealth is because of some distortion. I think health is the norm. It's harmony with our environment. Harmony with our environment is the standard. It's the norm. It just happens by itself. And, despite wherever we are, if we're conscious and in the moment and in love, we'll be moved into that place if we're listening from that deeper perspective. But it's clear that love is more important than any form it takes, if that makes sense. And there's a bigger picture going on that supersedes any practice, right?
Right. And like, who gets to decide what harmony actually is,
and what
health
like,
actually is,
and how? Yeah.
So like, I can sit here, and I have like vibrated love and focused on service and focused on relationships, and still my body persists in some of these things. Does that mean that I'm not spiritual enough, not loving enough? Like, it's so easy to start measuring.
Yeah, and I think like things that like Steve said, you're like, all of our bodies are made up of such a unique blend of things, right? Like, I can look at someone who looks identical to me and looked identical to me 2 years ago, and they're living their best life. Their energy levels are great. They are really happy. They're, whatever. And I was like constant pain, chronic illness, gout, and couldn't run to save my life. And, it doesn't, like, it's such a, I feel like we're trying to measure, I'm trying to think of a good analogy here, but it would be like the equivalent of trying to measure intelligence by how much weight I can lift. Like, it doesn't make sense, right? Like, your spirituality and the physical form your body takes aren't connected in that way. Like,
but there is some connection.
There is a connection.
Yeah, because obviously when I started midwifery and you started to kind of like say yes to yourself, like things got easier. The motivation was there. And like right now I'm sitting in like no resistance or difficulty to not eating junk food, you know? Like,
there is a connection, but I don't think it's one that's value oriented, right? Like, when you are in a more spiritual moment, or when you are like propelled by passion, like you were with midwifery, your body reacts to that positivity, that positive energy, that growth and whatever it is. And sometimes it responds to that by lessening your pain and lessening your struggle. And sometimes it responds to that by making it worse. You know,
consciousness doesn't give a shit.
Yeah.
Whether it's pain or pleasure, you know.
Yeah.
And I would choose pleasure if I could do it, right? Sangria, you know. Solagria. That's the Xochi and I are going to Aya ceremony night, and the Huniquin, this is their saying, Solagria, right? Like only joy. But that's the funny thing is like even the pain held consciously turns into joy.
Right. And that was my experience with that pain in the fast. And was like, whoa, this is a lot of pain.
And I can't
it's kind of cool.
You can't say to anybody, I'm glad you're suffering physical pain because it's made you into a conscious, beautiful, compassionate being. You know, I can't even say that because I don't want you to suffer pain, right? I don't want any human being to suffer pain. It's a part of my empathetic, compassionate self that says, but at the same time, I'm sure glad they do.
I mean, look,
because if it was only joy, we'd just all be assholes all the time. Like, we would never, consciousness isn't possible
we wouldn't be able to access joy.
Without the opposite, without the pain, without something, you know.
And the reality is, like, I wouldn't give up my personality just to wipe away the struggle and pain of the judgment and the weight. Like, I spent 30 years overweight and struggling with health and all that kind of stuff. But also, I really fucking love the person I am right now.
Yeah.
And I loved the person I was the whole time, even if I didn't love myself sometimes. And I'm like, if those things, it's like when you look at a marriage that ends, right? And you're like, I have my kids, so I can't regret the fact that I was in a really shitty marriage for X amount of years, right? And it's like that. Like, I wouldn't trade the personality I have now, the person I am now, for what I wish I'd had back then. Like, I remember being a kid, and puberty is when it hit me too. Like 13, I went from being like a rake to being a tank, you know, and it was a nightmare. But like, I remember being like, if I could wish for anything, it wouldn't be for money. It wouldn't be for, if I had 3 wishes, it would just be this. And it was always weight, right? And I look back at that now and I'm like, nope, all of that stuff was just so necessary, you know? And now the funny thing is, because I have I've come a long way, right? And I've lost the weight and I feel really good about myself. Now I'm having to watch for a whole different kind of judgment of like, are people treating me in a different way because now I don't look fat and weird and big? Like, especially kids and students, like I'll be teaching a class and I'm like, why is this female student paying me so much attention right now? I'm not comfortable. This feels weird. I never had to worry about that when I was 320 pounds. You know what I mean? But also with like friends and people I meet in the street, and like, I'll go to a store and I'll have someone offering me an upsize in my drink and just being like, no worries. And I'm like, okay, what the is going you know? And I was oblivious. Like, Nikki was like, this is not okay. This person is really into you. Yeah, right? And I'm like, what the fuck is that? But people treat you so differently.
Yeah.
And also based on what they know about you. Like, people who knew me when I was big, know me and watch for my weight now and will talk to me about like if I've put on weight, and I'm like, that's not a socially acceptable thing for you to be like, are you bouncing back? But they knew me when I was fat and they know me when I'm thin, so they're like, oh, you know. And people who didn't know me before and have only ever met me at this point in my transformation don't appreciate how much effort I've been through, but also treat me like I've just always been like I am now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so interesting to see the different ways that people look at you and treat you and think about you based on those percentages. You know, like when I went back home to Australia and I hadn't been there since I started the weight loss journey, it was like losing the weight all over again, but all at once. People hadn't seen me in 2 years, and the last time they saw me, I was huge for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now I was not, and it was like, what the hell happened to you? And people here had seen it happen, right? So they were like, oh, you're looking great, you're doing great. It was a slow build. People over there, like, it was almost like they were offended that my body had changed
so much. Yeah.
And I'm like, it just is such an interesting thing. I remember the only time I experienced a similar thing was when I decided to join like the LDS church. And my personality changed so much that people were offended.
Mm-hmm.
And so it comes down to like, it actually, for everyone else, it doesn't actually matter what you look like. There is always some kind of judgment or assumption attached to your effect on me. Right? Like I see you and you are this kind of person and you have this kind of effect on me. And this is the judgment I attach to that set of scenarios. And it's kind of funny to watch people freak out.
Yeah.
When you totally
like
fuck
it
with that.
dysregulates their nervous system because like their stable view of who you are just got like
totally
broken.
derailed. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how much of our happiness is relative? You know, it's so interesting. How much of our happiness, like there's, Jesus said the poor will always be among you, right? And I think the reason why is because some people need to look at other people and say, oh, well, I'm doing better than they are. We've always had the aristocratic class. You know, it's interesting, the health thing, the struggles with weight, etc. I've never had that so much, but I got pretty fat on my mission. But like, you know, as soon as I got back and started to eat like a normal human, it was all right. But the brain thing has been my misfit. You know, the ADHD and the scatteredness, like my brain is just different. Yeah. It doesn't operate on the parameters that other brains operate on, you know, in a way, totally just the same. You know? So I mean every human experiences lack of focus, difficulty, you know. I find myself in this same kind of misfit energy. Yeah. And I also thank God for my broken brain. You know, the way that Gabor Mate puts it, having severe ADD is like having half your brain tied behind your back, you know, and you just have to operate with the one, you know, you just have to kind of deal with it. But in a way, to me, it creates all sorts of interesting thinking patterns and a difference of seeing and being in a way that I can't. I am practically worthless as far as my ability to, you know, put things in a line and get them done, you know. But I am impractically wonderful. Like this brain does all sorts of tricks. I mean, that are pretty, you know, for as far as making money and being, you know, what's considered you know, a solid human being, functional human being, not so great. You know, I'm driving down the road the other day. I was clearing the snow off my car the other day, and I looked at my registration tag. I'm like, oh shit, I'm 3 months over. You know, it brought me back to the time last year when I was driving down the road and I got pulled over and I did not have my registration. I did not have my driver's license renewed, and no insurance. and you know, at those moments in life, I think, well, why didn't I think about it? Because I didn't even think about it. Like I hadn't even put it together that those things had happened. So that's dysfunctional. And so, you know, it reminded me of that. It was like, oh, this was over in December. Shit. I've been driving around with this. And I had to go to court and the judge said, you know, if you have another thing, if I have another violation, I'm screwed. You know, they'll probably take away my license at that point. And I kind of feel like they should sometimes. like it's really
that's part of the rules, I guess.
You know, I only say that just to kind of give you a taste of that. But the way that we are physically, the way that we show up, the dysfunctions that we have, we didn't choose them. You know, people people want to tell you that they are people who are selling shit want to tell you that you chose and that they have the answer.
But also people who are just in what's considered culturally normal.
Yeah.
Want to tell you you're choosing it, because then that means that they're choosing the right thing,
Right.
and they're doing good.
Like, but it's their fault that it's so good.
Yeah. So like I noticed like someone who is just like doing nothing but is fine health wise, or isn't neurodivergent in any way, is much quicker to put the blame on the person who is other, because it means that they've done something correct in being not other. You know?
Yeah, right.
It gives them a sense of control.
How much of our happiness is that, and how much of our dysfunction is like? So, for instance, we can go into a spin on. I can go to a spin on the ADD thing, and I can just say, "Well, that's all my problems," and I'll never try to really work on it. And you know, like relative, and I could just feel bad that I don't have a brain that works real well, you know, in certain practical circumstances.
Sure.
And, you know, you can do that with the body in all the ways, right? Yeah. Like, okay. And you almost see people who have pride for their dysfunction, but then that pride goes dark. And that becomes a limiting factor, right?
Yeah.
Just like there's pride on the other side or ego on the other side, and people are like, "Look at me, my body is. I'm a Greek god, and you should all just worship this shit."
Right,
and I'm doing the right thing. Obviously, God loves me more than He loves you. You know, like it's such the body. Just this whole conversation, the thing that I've gotten out of it really is like, it's such a visceral. Example of how we can move out of consciousness, however we are. And we're given a set, and that set is for us. And we can talk about it. This conversation is worthwhile. I get a lot out of seeing your pattern and my pattern and all the patterns that I've seen. I get a lot out of it, but I can never really measure. My happiness never really can be relative.
Yeah. If it is, I mean, then it's too fragile. It's broken.
It's absolutely fragile, but that is what people are always trying to do. You know, they're always trying to create this.
It's easy. If I can relativity. If I can set my happiness to against someone who is constantly worse off than me, then my happiness is safe.
Yeah.
But the second that guy loses 100 pounds and suddenly is hot now my happiness is shit, right? But also I think it's really interesting because to me, like when you're talking about this very visceral set of circumstances that we're given that show us our dysfunction or whatever, right? The body is like, you think about how long it takes to be, say, diagnosed with ADHD or autism, right? Or neurodivergence in any way or things like that. Or how long it takes to develop your intelligence to the level that you're like, now I can measure it and it means something, right? Or your skill set. The body is a way that very quickly we get to experience difference and disharmony and like learn how to live with that, right? Like because it's so visceral and it doesn't even really matter. Like I had a friend growing up who we'd go to McDonald's and we'd order the same thing, which was not a good idea for me or him. Because it was like, you know, a Big Mac meal and 20 nuggets or some shit, right? And I was big and he was a fucking rake, right? But he also constantly hid behind me and was in fear because he had a massive mouth and a tiny frame, right? So he wasn't thrilled with his body composition either, you know? But the body is a way that we at the onset, it's one of the first ways that we start to see difference, and you can't hide it as easily, right? Like you can hide your lack of intelligence, you can hide neurodivergence, you can mask, you can whatever. But when you're in the playground in 3rd grade and you're looking around you and there's one kid who's bigger than everybody else, and there's one kid who, you know, has a limp or a brace or whatever it is, and even like braces versus glasses, and it immediately sets you in a space where we, from very young, begin to understand that we are different and we are other, and other is a thing we're always going to have to live with. Yeah. You know? And I think that's like part of the reason that we have so much variance in the body. If we think of consciousness as trying to experience itself, it wants to do that immediately. It doesn't want to wait till you're 35 before it starts to experience otherness. right? But I just think it's such an interesting thing.
Mm-hmm.
Otherness is really important.
Yeah.
So I wanted to give you the last word on this. This is kind of your experience lately, and give us some overall to take us out of this.
Well, I want to, come back and re-emphasize, like, don't wait. Nothing is worth waiting for love, when it's here right now. And the other thing that's been really, stirring in me in the last little bit of this conversation is how deeply grateful I am for the amount of compassion that is possible when you are experiencing rejection or pain. And we don't always harvest that treasure, but it's always there when something isn't going the way we want. And I really felt that deeply the other day. And, when I kind of crashed, I was like, oh, I'm so grateful for this moment that I could have been like, oh, look how great I am. I did this thing. Now I'm going to feel good. Everybody should do this thing. Because that's, what our minds do is they immediately want to take credit for anything good. But then I was able to sit and feel the people who really don't have the resources to go to Hawaii and take a week to have that kind of spaciousness and healing, and who every single day are puzzled by both their lack of vitality and the amount of rejection they experience. And so I want to end with that note of gratitude for my experience and for the harvest of compassion that I've had from it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Thanks for joining us today. This was a wonderful and interesting discussion, and really feeling a lot of tenderness and appreciation to each of us for the ways that we've struggled with our physical health. And look forward to more episodes with you. And if you would like to join our podcast, please reach out. We love having guests. We love having questions submitted. Please like, share, subscribe, and look us up on soulandspiritwellness.com for more of our offerings.